I returned home to find 35 years of my life stuffed into two worn suitcases sitting on the sidewalk. The door was locked, my phone number was blocked, and my son, my only child, whom I had raised largely on my own after my husband fell ill, was looking out from the window with the eyes of a stranger. The rain had just started to fall, a light drizzle that would soon soak through the canvas of my luggage. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, as droplets collected on my gray hair and ran down my face, mingling with tears I didn't realize I was shedding. Neighbors peeked through curtains, but no one came out to help the 62-year-old woman who had suddenly become homeless. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a meticulously calculated plan that had been unfolding for months while I was too consumed by grief to notice. As I dragged my suitcases away from the home I had owned for 3 decades, I made a decision. This wouldn't be the end of my story. It would be the beginning of my fight back. 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom, facing my daughter-in-law, Madison, as she shouted, "She's a manipulative leech who's been stealing from us for years." I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly reached into my purse, pulled out a sealed manila envelope, and handed it to the judge. As Judge Baker examined its contents, her expression transformed from judicial neutrality to barely controlled anger. She looked up, her voice cutting through the suddenly silent courtroom. "No one moves. Close the doors." Perhaps you're wondering how a 62-year-old woman like me went from being thrown out on the street to standing in a courtroom with evidence that could send my daughter-in-law to prison. It's a story of betrayal, but also a story about the strength you never know you have until it's your only option. I'm glad to have you here. Please comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. My story might help others recognize the signs I missed. Before all this happened, I was Sylvia Harper, recently retired after 35 years as a professional accountant. I had built my career in the male-dominated finance industry of the 1980s, facing discrimination, but succeeding through hard work and intelligence. My small accounting firm specialized in personal finance and small businesses, and I had earned a reputation for integrity and meticulous attention to detail. My husband Richard had passed away 18 months earlier, leaving me alone in our restored Victorian home in a nice neighborhood. We'd been married for 38 years, a happy marriage despite the challenges of Richard's heart condition, which had begun deteriorating 10 years before his death. I'd cared for him while maintaining my career, often juggling client meetings with doctor's appointments. Our son Austin was our only child. I'd raised him largely on my own during Richard's illness, and we'd developed a close mother-son relationship, but Austin had always been emotionally dependent on others, seeking approval and avoiding conflict whenever possible. He worked at a real estate company, where he was competent but never seemed to advance because he wouldn't assert himself. The most precious possession I had was my wedding ring, a unique emerald piece Richard had designed, with a family heirloom stone. "This green matches the spark in your eyes," he'd said when he proposed. After his death, I never took it off, finding comfort in this tangible connection to our life together. Financially, I was stable. Our home was paid off, and Richard's life insurance, combined with my retirement fund, left me with approximately $1.2 million in assets. I had always been careful with money, a habit from watching my own mother struggle in a substandard nursing home when I was younger. Despite my financial security, I harbored a deep fear of becoming a burden to Austin or having to live alone in my old age. The grief after Richard died was overwhelming. I'd wake up reaching for him in the middle of the night, forgetting for a blissful moment that he was gone. The grandfather clock in the hallway, which Richard had lovingly restored, seemed to mark time in a house that had suddenly become too quiet, too empty. I kept to my routines, tending my garden, attending weekly bridge games with church friends, maintaining the home Richard and I had built together, but joy had drained from these activities. That's when Austin and his wife Madison offered to move in to help me through my grief. Madison was 34, strikingly attractive with sleek brown hair and a confident posture that commanded attention. She'd met Austin at the real estate company where they both worked. Their relationship had progressed quickly, engaged after just 6 months, married after 8. I'd had concerns about the speed of their relationship, but kept them to myself, not wanting to seem like an interfering mother-in-law. What I didn't know then was that Madison had grown up in difficult circumstances, moving frequently as her parents divorced when she was young. Her father leaving when she was only 10, she'd had to fend for herself from an early age, developing a survivor's mentality that saw every relationship as a potential transaction. More importantly, I didn't know that Madison had once worked for a company called Westbrook Financial, a firm where I had uncovered and reported accounting fraud years earlier. The owner, Jeffrey Westbrook, had been fired and faced legal consequences as a result of my whistleblowing. This connection would have explained so much about what was to come. The day after Richard's funeral, Austin knocked on my door. I was still in my black dress, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The house felt impossibly empty, with nothing but the sound of Richard's grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. "Mom," Austin said, running his hand through his hair the way his father used to. "Madison and I have been talking. We don't think you should be alone right now." I wanted to say no. Every instinct told me this was a mistake. But the loneliness after Richard's death was a dark abyss, and Austin was my only child. Madison stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, her expression calculating rather than sympathetic. She'd never shown much interest in spending time with me before Richard died. At family gatherings, she'd make polite conversation for a few minutes before finding reasons to step away. "We could stay in the guest room," Austin continued, "just temporarily, until you're feeling stronger. If you think it would help," I heard myself saying, against my better judgment. Madison's smile was radiant. "We'll take such good care of you. Mom Harper." That first night, after I'd gone to bed, I overheard Madison whispering to Austin about the potential of this house and what we could do with it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief was making me suspicious of kindness, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. The changes began subtly. Madison would move small items while cleaning, then apologize when I couldn't find them. "I'm so sorry. Mom Harper, I thought the sugar bowl looked better on this shelf." But it wasn't just displacement. Items were disappearing entirely. Richard's stamp collection, which he'd built since childhood, accidentally got thrown away. Our wedding album was mistakenly left in the damp basement. My address book vanished from the kitchen drawer where I'd kept it for years. When I asked about it, Madison looked concerned. "You asked me to throw it away yesterday. Remember, you said all those old numbers were just making you sad." I had no memory of such a conversation. But Madison's certainty made me doubt myself. One morning, I noticed my emerald wedding ring was missing from its usual place in my jewelry box. Panic surged through me as I searched every corner of my bedroom. "Madison, have you seen my wedding ring, the emerald one Richard gave me?" Madison's concerned expression was perfect. "No, Mom Harper, when did you last have it?" "I always put it in my jewelry box before showering." Madison nodded sympathetically. "Memory lapses are common with grief. Perhaps you put it somewhere else. That happens often with seniors." The word seniors stung. I was 62, not 90. But more troubling was the suggestion that I was becoming forgetful. As someone who had spent decades managing complex financial accounts, I prided myself on my sharp mind. Austin always sided with his wife. "Mom, Madison's just trying to modernize the house a bit. Nobody wants to live in a museum." When I protested about my missing wedding ring, he said, "You probably misplaced it. You've been pretty scattered since Dad died." My beautiful antique dining set, which Richard and I had saved for years to buy, disappeared one weekend while I was visiting my sister Barbara. "We donated it," Madison explained when I returned. "You seemed so sad whenever you looked at it. Plus, it was too large for the space. We found this lovely modern set that opens up the room." The new dining set was small, sleek, and soulless, like sitting at a cafe table rather than a family gathering place. When I expressed my disappointment, Austin said, "Mom, you can't keep everything the same forever. Change is good for you." Meanwhile, Madison began asking questions about my finances bills, property taxes, utility costs. "I noticed you have stacks of mail piling up," she said one morning, her voice gentle with concern. "Would you like me to help you go through it?" I know how overwhelming paperwork can be when you're grieving. I should have said no. But the truth was, I had been letting things pile up. Opening bills and bank statements felt like admitting Richard was really gone, that I was truly on my own now. That would be helpful, I admitted. Madison's efficiency was impressive. She sorted everything into neat piles, explaining each category as she worked bills to pay immediately, statements to file, junk mail to discard. She held up a credit card offer. You get so many of these scam letters. It's good that you haven't been opening them. Seniors are targeted by these predators all the time. There it was again. Seniors. Over the following days, Madison gradually took over more of my administrative tasks. I'll handle the insurance paperwork for Richard's burial, she offered. You shouldn't have to deal with such depressing details right now. When Richard's life insurance check arrived, she brought it to me with a sympathetic expression. Such a large amount must feel overwhelming. Would you like me to help you deposit it safely? That should have raised a red flag. Madison knew exactly how much the life insurance policy was worth, information I'd never shared with her, but grief makes you careless with details that would normally demand attention. The bank visit was my first real taste of Madison's manipulation skills. She accompanied me, her arm linked through mine like a loving daughter. When we sat with the account manager, she did most of the talking. My mother-in-law is having such a difficult time, she explained to the young man behind the desk. She's been forgetting to pay bills, losing important documents. We're worried about her managing such a large sum on her own. She squeezed my hand. I've offered to help her stay organized. I wanted to protest. I wasn't forgetting bills or losing documents. But Madison's tone was so caring, so reasonable, that contradicting her would have made me look defensive and confused. The bank manager nodded sympathetically and suggested adding Madison as a joint account holder for convenience. Just temporarily, Madison assured me later, until you're feeling more like yourself. That night, I lay awake listening to Madison and Austin's hushed conversation through the thin walls. I couldn't make out specific words, but Madison's tone was excited, triumphant. Austin's responses sounded uncertain, questioning. The next day, I noticed Madison answering my phone when friends called. Sylvia's resting, she'd tell them. She's having a difficult day. Maybe try again tomorrow. When my sister Barbara called, Madison relayed messages that never quite sounded like my sister's actual words. My bridge group was handled with particular skill. Madison called each member personally to explain that I was taking a break from social activities while processing my grief. Sylvia feels guilty when she has to decline invitations, Madison told them. She's worried about disappointing people. It's better if you give her space rather than reaching out directly. Within a month, my social circle had shrunk to almost nothing. The women who'd been my friends for decades were suddenly absent from my life. I discovered that Madison had told Jessica, the daughter of my closest friend, that we're considering moving Sylvia to a nursing home because she can't take care of herself anymore. Jessica had been horrified and called to check on me, managing to reach me directly only because Madison was out shopping. Is it true, Sylvia? Are you that bad off? Jessica asked. Of course not, I said, shocked. Who told you that? The conversation opened my eyes to how systematically Madison was isolating me. She had even forgotten to pass along an invitation to my grandniece's wedding, causing me to miss an important family event. Madison told neighbors I was having memory issues and shouldn't be overstimulated. She insisted I use a new cell phone she had set up, which I later discovered allowed her to monitor my calls. With each passing day, I felt more trapped, more isolated, more erased from my own life. 3 months into their stay, I realized I hadn't written a check or made a bank transaction in weeks. All my financial business was flowing through Madison's helpful hands. My mail was sorted according to her judgment. My social connections had been severed by her protective interventions. When a home repair was needed, Madison would say, "Don't worry about it, Mom Harper. I'll take care of everything." She would later show me invoices for amounts that seemed excessive, but I had no way to verify them. Madison suggested consolidating some of my investment accounts for easier management and questioned my long-standing investment advisor's fees. "He seems to be charging you too much. I know someone who could do it for half the price." Each change was presented as helpful simplification, protection against my supposedly declining mental faculties, and Austin supported every suggestion, his trust in his wife absolute. The most insidious part was how Madison made me complicit in my own victimization. She'd ask my permission for everything, making each decision seem like my choice. "Should I pay this bill for you? Mom Harper? Would you like me to call the bank about this confusing statement? Don't you think it would be easier if I handled these transactions?" I said yes, because saying no would mean admitting I didn't trust her. And admitting I didn't trust her meant admitting that Austin had married someone who was systematically destroying my independence. But Madison made one crucial error. She assumed that because I was grieving, I was also stupid. She forgot that I'd spent 35 years managing complex financial accounts, that I'd built my career on attention to detail and documentation, and her biggest mistake was yet to come. One evening, I received an automated alert from my bank about an unusual transaction, $40,000, withdrawn from my retirement account in a single transaction. This was set up years ago as a security measure, with notifications going to an email address Madison didn't know about. I searched for recent account statements, but couldn't find any in my filing cabinet. When Madison and Austin returned from dinner that evening, I confronted her directly. "Madison, $40,000 was withdrawn from my retirement account today. Did you know anything about that?" Her expression flickered momentarily before settling into concern. "What are you talking about, Sylvia?" "There was no such withdrawal." "I received an alert from the bank," I insisted, showing her my phone. Madison's demeanor changed instantly. The caring daughter-in-law facade dropped, replaced by cold calculation. "You're becoming paranoid. Sylvia," she said, her voice hard. "First you accuse me of stealing. Now you're imagining transactions that don't exist." Austin entered during our confrontation. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. "Your mother is having some kind of episode," Madison said quickly. "She's imagining that I've stolen money from her accounts." "Mom, that's a serious accusation," Austin said, immediately taking Madison's side. "It's not an accusation, it's a fact," I replied. $40,000 was withdrawn today." Madison showed Austin her phone. "Look, I logged into her account. There's no such transaction." Of course, there wouldn't be if she had transferred the money to another account first, but Austin accepted her explanation without question. "Maybe we should have her evaluated," Madison suggested quietly to Austin, as if I wasn't standing right there. This paranoia could be a sign of something more serious. That's when I knew I was in real trouble. Madison wasn't just stealing my money. She was methodically building a case that I was mentally incompetent, the forgetful widow, overwhelmed by finances, making wild accusations against her devoted daughter-in-law. As I lay in bed that night, a clarity washed over me. The fog of grief that had clouded my judgment for months lifted, replaced by a cold determination. I had allowed grief to make me weak, but I wasn't grieving anymore. I was angry, and anger brought a clarity I desperately needed. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I would fight back, not with accusations or confrontations, but with the meticulous attention to detail that had defined my professional life. If Madison wanted to play games with an accountant, she was about to learn she'd chosen the wrong opponent. When Madison and Austin left for work, I began my investigation. I carefully examined my home office, discovering files missing and forged signatures on documents I'd never seen. Using my old laptop that Madison didn't know about, I created a secure email account to communicate without her knowledge. I started documenting every manipulative behavior, keeping detailed notes in a secure app on my old phone. I purchased a small recording device, capturing conversations when Madison discussed finances. The calm, methodical approach felt familiar, like working on a complex audit case back in my professional days. After cash disappeared from my emergency fund drawer, I installed a hidden camera in my home office. The footage I captured was damning Madison rifling through my files, photographing financial documents, even practicing my signature on scratch paper. Most revealing was a deliberately planted trap. I accidentally left a note about a non-existent secret account worth $50,000, where Madison would find it, within hours. She was searching my office for details, making calls to try to locate this fictional money. I was no longer a victim, I was building a case, and Madison had no idea what was coming. My first call was to Diana Johnson, my former colleague who had become a forensic accountant specializing in elder financial abuse. I had to be careful Madison was monitoring my cell phone, so I borrowed my newspaper delivery person's phone one morning when he came by. "Sylvia, is that really you?" Diana sounded shocked. "I've been trying to reach you for months every time I called. Madison said you were resting or not feeling up to talking." "Diana, I need your help," I said, keeping my voice low even though I was alone in the house. "I think Madison is stealing from me, and she's trying to have me declared incompetent." There was a pause on the line. "How bad is it?" "At least $40,000 so far that I know of. But it's more than money. She's isolated me from friends, taken over my finances, and now she's gaslighting me, making me question my own memory and sanity." Diana's response was immediate and firm. "Sylvia, you're not the first intelligent woman to fall for this con. Grief makes people vulnerable, and predators like Madison are experts at exploiting that vulnerability. The important thing now is building a case before she realizes you're onto her." We arranged to meet secretly at my doctor's office the following week, a place Madison couldn't reasonably object to me going alone. Diana explained that she had a personal stake in helping me. "My mother was a victim of financial abuse by my stepfather after my father died," she confided. "By the time we realized what was happening, he'd drained her accounts and remortgaged her home. That's why I specialize in these cases now." Diana walked me through the process of documenting financial crimes. Hidden cameras were legal in my own home, especially if I suspected theft. Recording conversations was trickier legally, but if I could prove fraud, those recordings might become admissible evidence. "The most important thing," Diana emphasized, "is not to let them know you're fighting back. If Madison realizes you've discovered her scheme, she might accelerate her timeline or destroy evidence." Back at home, I continued my covert investigation. The footage from my hidden camera revealed even more disturbing behavior than I'd initially found. Madison entered my office almost daily when she thought I was napping or out for errands. She photographed documents, practiced my signature, and made phone calls to financial institutions claiming to be me. In one particularly chilling recording, I heard her on the phone with my investment advisor. "This is Sylvia Harper. I'm calling to discuss liquidating some assets. I've been having some memory issues lately, so my daughter-in-law Madison is helping me manage things. Could you send the necessary paperwork to her attention?" My investment advisor, who'd known me for 20 years, apparently accepted this explanation without question. Within days, paperwork arrived for closing 2 of my smaller retirement accounts. But the most revealing evidence came from conversations between Madison and Austin that I recorded while they thought I was out walking. Their voices carried clearly through the old house's thin walls. "The probate lawyer says we need to be careful with the timeline," Madison was saying. "If we file for guardianship too soon after moving in, it might raise questions." "I still don't understand why we need guardianship at all," Austin replied, his voice troubled. "Mom seems fine to me. Sad, but not incompetent." Madison's laugh was cold. "She's been fine so far because I've been managing everything for her. But look at these bank statements. She's been making terrible financial decisions, withdrawing large amounts for no reason, forgetting about bills, signing documents she doesn't understand." My blood ran cold as I realized what she was doing. Madison was creating evidence of my supposed incompetence by making the very financial mistakes she was attributing to me. The withdrawals she'd forged were being presented as proof of my declining mental state. "Once we have guardianship," Madison continued, "we can move her into that assisted living facility we looked at. The house can be sold to pay for her care, and we can manage her remaining assets more efficiently. Efficiently for whom? Austin asked, and for a moment, I heard a flicker of the moral sun I'd raised. For her, of course, Madison said smoothly. And for us, we're sacrificing our own lives to care for her. Austin, we deserve some security for our future, too. I heard Austin sigh. I know, but some of these withdrawals. Did Mom really agree to give us $5,000 for that weekend trip? My heart sank. So Austin wasn't completely innocent. He'd known about at least some of the smaller fraudulent transactions, but had chosen to believe Madison's explanations. She wanted us to have a nice anniversary, Madison said dismissively. Stop worrying so much. That conversation clarified everything. Madison wasn't just stealing my money, she was planning to steal my entire life. The assisted living facility would isolate me completely, making me dependent on her version of events. The house sale would provide a massive influx of cash, and guardianship would give her legal control over every aspect of my existence. I had to move fast. Diana helped me establish a strategy. We would need to collect enough evidence to convince a judge that I was being exploited before Madison could file for guardianship. The timeline was tight. Based on the conversations I'd recorded, Madison was planning to make her move within weeks. The key is proving two things, Diana explained. First, that you're mentally competent. Second, that Madison has been deliberately manipulating your finances and isolating you as part of a fraudulent scheme. For the first part, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Nathan Reynolds, a respected geriatric psychiatrist. I told Madison it was just a routine checkup, but in reality, I needed an independent evaluation of my cognitive function. If Madison tries to declare you incompetent, a recent clean bill of mental health from a specialist will be crucial, Diana advised. Dr. Reynolds' office was exactly what I'd expected: sterile, institutional, designed to make elderly patients feel diminished and vulnerable. But Dr. Reynolds himself surprised me. He was younger than I'd anticipated, with intelligent eyes and a gentle manner that seemed genuinely concerned rather than condescending. Madison had requested to sit in on the evaluation, citing her role as my caretaker. Dr. Reynolds politely but firmly declined. I need to speak with Mrs. Harper privately to get an accurate assessment, he insisted, showing Madison to the waiting room. For the first time in months, I was alone with a professional who wasn't being influenced by Madison's narrative. The evaluation began with standard cognitive tests, memory exercises, problem-solving tasks, orientation questions. I performed well on all of them, and I could see Dr. Reynolds making notes that didn't support a dementia diagnosis. Then he asked about my living situation and recent changes in my life. My daughter-in-law has been very helpful since my husband died, I said carefully. She's taken over most of my financial management. How do you feel about that arrangement? He asked. It was the first time in months that anyone had asked how I felt about what was happening to me. The question nearly broke my composure. Sometimes I wonder if I'm becoming too dependent on her help, I admitted. I used to be very capable with money. I ran my own accounting firm for 35 years. Dr. Reynolds looked up from his notes. What kind of accounting work did you do? I described my career, my expertise, my reputation in the business community. Reynolds listened intently, occasionally asking follow-up questions that demonstrated he understood the complexity of the work I'd done. Mrs. Harper, he said finally, based on our conversation today, I see no evidence of cognitive impairment that would prevent you from managing your own affairs. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning skills are intact, and your judgment appears sound. Relief flooded through me. What about the financial issues my daughter-in-law mentioned? Dr. Reynolds frowned. What specific issues? I described the concerns Madison had raised: forgotten bills, impulsive withdrawals, poor financial decisions. Dr. Reynolds made more notes. Have you actually been experiencing these problems? Or have others told you that you're experiencing them? The question hit like a lightning bolt. Others have told me, I realized. I don't remember making the mistakes they've described. Dr. Reynolds nodded slowly. Mrs. Harper. I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I want you to think carefully before answering. Do you feel safe in your current living situation? The question hung in the air between us. This was my chance to tell the truth, to ask for help from someone with the authority to intervene. But I also knew that any accusations I made would be dismissed as paranoid delusions if I couldn't prove them. I'm not sure, I said honestly. I think I need to investigate some concerns before I can answer that question properly. Doctor? Reynolds studied my face for a long moment. If you ever feel unsafe or need someone to talk to confidentially, here's my direct number. He handed me a card. Sometimes family members have the best intentions, but don't realize they're being overprotective in ways that harm their loved one's independence. When the evaluation ended, Madison was waiting in the reception area with barely concealed anxiety. How did it go? She asked brightly. Dr. Reynolds was very thorough, I said neutrally. On the drive home, Madison probed for details about the evaluation. I gave vague responses while my mind raced with possibilities. Dr. Reynolds' assessment would undermine Madison's case for guardianship, but I wasn't sure it would be enough to expose her financial crimes. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Diana and asked her to contact Dr. Reynolds' office. I want him to know about the financial irregularities. I told her, if Madison tries to use a psychiatric evaluation to support her guardianship petition, he needs to understand the full context. Diana was quiet for a moment. Sylvia, that's risky. If Dr. Reynolds reports suspected elder abuse, it could trigger an investigation before we're ready. I think we have to take that risk, I said. Madison's timeline is accelerating. If we wait much longer, she might succeed in having me declared incompetent before we can prove she's the one committing crimes. The next day, Diana met with Dr. Reynolds and shared our evidence. His response was immediate and decisive. He would not only refuse to support the guardianship petition, but would testify about signs of psychological manipulation if necessary. While building my case, I made another surprising discovery. A chance encounter with my neighbor Georgia Wilson revealed that she had been watching Madison's activities with suspicion. I've seen her coming and going at odd hours, Georgia confided when we ran into each other at the mailbox. And once, I overheard her on the phone in your front yard, talking about selling your house. I thought it was strange since it's your house, not hers. Did you hear what she said exactly? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Georgia nodded. She was saying something about how once some guardianship went through, the house could be sold immediately, and there was nothing you could do about it. I recorded it on my phone because it felt wrong. My heart leaped. You have a recording? Yes, Georgia said. I keep an eye out for my neighbors, especially since my mother was taken advantage of by her caregiver years ago. Something about your daughter-in-law never sat right with me. Another piece of evidence had appeared just when I needed it most. Georgia, would you be willing to share that recording with my lawyer and possibly testify if needed? Absolutely, she said firmly. I won't stand by and watch it happen to you too. 2 days before Madison planned to file for guardianship, she presented me with documents to sign. Just some insurance paperwork, she said casually. The company needs updated beneficiary information. I glanced at the papers and my blood ran cold. They weren't insurance forms. They were financial powers of attorney that would give Madison complete control over my remaining assets. I'll look these over later, I said, setting them aside. Madison's mask slipped for just a moment. They need to be returned tomorrow. Mom Harper, it's time sensitive. That night, I realized Madison was panicking. Dr. Reynolds' evaluation hadn't gone as she'd planned, and she was trying to secure legal control over my finances before the guardianship hearing could potentially go against her. But her most shocking betrayal was yet to be discovered. While searching online for evidence of financial transactions, I stumbled across something that took my breath away. There, on an online marketplace, was my emerald wedding ring, the irreplaceable symbol of Richard's love, being sold by an account I traced back to Madison. The listing described it as a vintage emerald ring, family heirloom quality. The photographs showed my ring from every angle, including the inside band where Richard had inscribed, "To my Sylvia, whose eyes outshine this stone." I stared at the screen, a profound sense of violation washing over me. She hadn't just taken my money or tried to steal my house. She had taken the most precious physical connection I had to Richard, the symbol of our life together, and treated it like merchandise. At that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about justice. Madison needed to face consequences for what she had done. The next morning, Madison cornered me again about the documents. "Did you have a chance to look over those papers the insurance company called again?" "I need more time," I said firmly. "I want my lawyer to review them first." Madison's expression darkened. "Your lawyer? Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since I realized my wedding ring is being sold online," I said quietly. The color drained from Madison's face. "What are you talking about?" I showed her my tablet, open to the marketplace listing featuring my distinctive emerald ring. That's not your ring," she stammered. "It's similar, but it has the inscription Richard put inside, 'To my Sylvia, whose eyes outshine this stone.' Only my ring has that." Austin walked in during our confrontation. "What's going on?" "Your wife is selling my wedding ring," I said, turning the tablet toward him. "The ring your father gave me, that I thought I'd misplaced." Austin looked stricken. "Madison, is this true?" "Of course not," she protested. "Your mother is confused again. This is exactly why we need the guardianship." "I'm not confused," I said calmly, "and I'm not signing these documents, which aren't insurance forms but power of attorney papers. If you want control of my assets, you'll have to convince a judge that I'm incompetent. Good luck with that after Dr. Reynolds's evaluation." Madison's expression transformed from defensive to furious. "You ungrateful old woman, after everything we've done for you." But I had one more revelation to share, one that would change everything. "Did you know, Austin, that your wife used to work for Westbrook Financial? The firm where Jeffrey Westbrook was fired and faced legal consequences after I reported his accounting fraud years ago." Austin's confused expression told me he had no idea. "Madison has been working with Jeffrey Westbrook. This isn't just about money, it's about revenge." Madison's face contorted with rage. "You ruined his life. He was a good man who made one mistake, and you destroyed everything he built." Her outburst confirmed what I had only suspected. This hadn't been a random exploitation. Madison had targeted me deliberately, with both financial gain and revenge as motives. Austin looked shocked, his gaze moving between Madison and me. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked her quietly. Madison ignored him, turning to me with cold fury. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Well, it doesn't matter what you've discovered. It's your word against mine. And who do you think people will believe, the grieving widow with memory issues, or the devoted daughter-in-law who's been caring for her?" "Actually," I said, "it's your word against mine. Dr. Reynolds, Diana Johnson, Georgia Wilson, and about 20 hours of video showing you forging my signature and stealing from me." The shock on Madison's face was almost worth everything I'd been through. "If you don't trust me enough to sign these papers," Madison said, her voice suddenly dangerous, "maybe you should find somewhere else to live." "Madison," Austin exclaimed, "you can't say that to my mother. This is her house. And we've been taking care of her and this house for months while she accuses us of stealing," Madison shouted. "I'm done. Either she signs the papers and apologizes, or she leaves." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, but years of emotional dependence on Madison had left him unable to stand up to her completely. "Mom, maybe we should all calm down," he said weakly. "I'm sure there's an explanation." "There is an explanation," I said, "and you'll hear all about it at the guardianship hearing." I turned and walked to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. That night, I could hear Madison and Austin arguing furiously. She was demanding that Austin control your mother, while he was finally beginning to question her motives. I packed a small overnight bag, planning to leave for my sister Barbara's house in the morning before the situation escalated further. I had all my evidence secured in cloud storage and with Diana. A guardianship hearing was inevitable now, but I would be ready. But Madison had one more devastating move to play. The next morning, I left early for a final meeting with Diana to prepare for the hearing. We spent 3 hours organizing my evidence and developing a strategy. Diana examined every document, every recording, every photograph, with the methodical precision that had made her reputation in forensic accounting. "This is one of the most sophisticated elder abuse cases I've seen," she told me. "Madison's been building this con for months, possibly planning it before Richard even died. She's created a paper trail that makes you look incompetent while positioning herself as the devoted caretaker. If she'd succeeded with the guardianship petition, you would have lost everything." Diana helped me contact Richard Simmons, a lawyer specializing in elder law and financial crimes. We scheduled an emergency consultation for later that afternoon, just before the guardianship hearing that Madison had arranged without my knowledge. But when I returned home to collect more of my belongings, I was met with a shocking sight. My 2 old suitcases sat on the sidewalk in front of my house, stuffed with clothes and a few personal items. The locks had been changed. Through the window, I could see Austin looking out, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. Madison had played her final card, physical eviction. By removing me from my home, she hoped to reinforce the narrative that I was unstable and needed care. She was gambling that without access to my documentation and personal records, I would appear confused and disoriented at the hearing. As I stood there in disbelief, my neighbor Georgia Wilson approached from her house next door. "Sylvia, what's happening? Why are your things outside?" I explained the situation briefly, trying to maintain my dignity despite the public humiliation of being locked out of my own home. Georgia's face hardened with anger. "I've been watching that woman since they moved in. The way she talks about you when you're not around. I never trusted her." "Thank you for your concern," I said, fighting back tears. "No, you don't understand," Georgia said, lowering her voice. "I have more recordings. She's been on the phone with someone named Jeffrey multiple times, discussing plans about your house and money. I kept recording because it seemed like you might need evidence someday." My heart leaped. "You have recordings of her talking to Jeffrey Westbrook?" Georgia nodded. "I don't know his last name, but she definitely calls him Jeffrey. In one call, she was laughing about how you'd never see it coming, how it was perfect justice for what you did to him." Another crucial piece of evidence had appeared just when I needed it most. "Georgia, would you be willing to share those recordings with my lawyer and possibly testify at the hearing tomorrow?" "Absolutely," she said firmly. "My husband Albert was taken advantage of by his nephew before he passed. I won't stand by and watch it happen to you too." I called my sister Barbara, who immediately came to pick me up. As we loaded my suitcases into her car, I noticed other neighbors watching from their windows. The public spectacle of an elderly woman being evicted from her own home was exactly what Madison had counted on, a humiliating display that would reinforce her narrative of my incompetence. But Madison had miscalculated. She didn't realize that by escalating to this public eviction, she had created witnesses to her abuse. Georgia wasn't the only neighbor who had observed Madison's behavior over the months, and now they were seeing the culmination of her plan. As Barbara drove me away from the home I'd shared with Richard for decades, I felt a strange mix of despair and determination. Madison had taken my house, my possessions, and tried to take my dignity, but she hadn't taken my mind, my will, or my ability to fight back. The guardianship hearing was the next morning. I would be ready, and Madison had no idea what was coming. The morning of the guardianship hearing arrived with a sense of finality. I'd spent the night at my sister Barbara's house, reviewing my evidence and preparing mentally for the confrontation ahead. Barbara, skeptical at first about the extent of Madison's manipulation, had become my fierce advocate after seeing the evidence I'd collected. "I can't believe that woman locked you out of your own home," she fumed as she helped me dress for court. I'd chosen my navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to important client meetings during my accounting career. If this was going to be my last stand, I wanted to look like the competent professional I'd always been, not the confused widow Madison had spent months creating. "The eviction might actually help our case," said Richard Simmons. The elder law specialist Diana had connected me with. He'd arrived early to review our strategy. "It shows how far Madison is willing to go to control your assets." Richard was in his 60s, with silver hair and the confident demeanor of someone who had seen every trick in the book. Elder financial abuse cases often go undetected because victims are too embarrassed to come forward. "You've done something remarkable by documenting everything so thoroughly." As we drove to the courthouse, I felt a strange calm. After months of being gaslit and manipulated, I was finally taking back control. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble columns and echoing hallways that made me feel small and vulnerable. Exactly the effect Madison was counting on. I realized she'd chosen this venue deliberately to emphasize my supposed fragility. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I spotted Madison and Austin with their lawyer, Mr. Patterson, younger than I'd expected, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from winning cases rather than seeking justice. Madison had chosen him carefully. Austin looked pale and uncomfortable, his eyes darting around nervously. When he saw me, his expression flickered with something like regret, before Madison pulled his attention back to their conversation. Then I noticed the small crowd gathering on my side of the hallway: Diana Johnson, Dr. Reynolds, Georgia Wilson, and to my surprise, several members of my bridge club, the women I'd played cards with every week for years until Madison had cut me off from them. Their presence brought tears to my eyes. "We're here for you, Sylvia," whispered Carol, my longtime bridge partner. "Jessica told us what was really happening. We should have reached out sooner." The courtroom doors opened, and we filed in. Judge Catherine Baker was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who commanded immediate respect. She reviewed the paperwork briefly before addressing the courtroom. "We're here today to consider a petition for guardianship of Sylvia Harper filed by her son Austin Harper and daughter-in-law Madison Harper. The petitioners claim that Mrs. Harper is no longer capable of managing her financial and personal affairs due to cognitive decline related to grief and advancing age." The words hit me like physical blows. Cognitive decline, advancing age. They were reducing my entire life to a medical condition that required management by others. Mr. Patterson rose to present their case, and his opening statement was masterful in its manipulation of facts. "Your Honor, Sylvia Harper was once a successful businesswoman, but the death of her husband 18 months ago has taken a severe toll on her mental faculties. Since that time, she has made increasingly irrational financial decisions, forgotten to pay important bills, and shown signs of paranoia toward the very family members who are trying to help her." He presented a timeline of my supposed decline that was frighteningly convincing because it contained just enough truth to be believable. Yes, I had been grieving. Yes, I had allowed Madison to help with my finances. Yes, there had been irregularities in my accounts. What he didn't mention was who had actually caused those irregularities. The witnesses Madison had assembled painted a picture of a confused, isolated woman who was clearly beyond caring for herself. My mail carrier testified about mail piling up uncollected. A bank teller described how Madison had to help me complete simple transactions. Even my family doctor, who had only seen me once since Richard died, with Madison present, suggested that grief might have affected my cognitive abilities. Each testimony was technically accurate, but stripped of crucial context. My mail had been piling up because Madison had been collecting it before I could get to it. I'd appeared confused at the bank because Madison had taken over the conversation and spoken for me, but the most damaging testimony came from Madison herself. She took the witness stand with perfect composure, her voice breaking at just the right moments as she described the heartbreak of watching her beloved mother-in-law deteriorate. "I've tried so hard to help her maintain her independence," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "But the financial mistakes have become more frequent and more serious. Last month alone, she withdrew nearly $15,000 from her savings account and couldn't explain where the money had gone." I wanted to scream that Madison had made those withdrawals herself using forged signatures and stolen account information, but Richard squeezed my hand. silently urging patience. Our turn was coming. Austin's testimony was hesitant, less certain than Madison's polished performance. He described finding me confused about bills and financial matters, but under Richard's cross-examination, admitted he'd never actually witnessed any specific incidents of confusion. He'd only heard about them from Madison. "And did you personally verify any of these financial irregularities?" Richard asked him. Austin shifted uncomfortably. "Madison handles most of the financial matters. So you've been relying on your wife's reports about your mother's condition?" "Yes, but..." "And despite living in the same house, you never witnessed these episodes of confusion directly?" Austin looked at Madison, then back at Richard. I guess not. It was a small crack in their united front, but it was enough to build on. When it was our turn to present evidence, Richard started with Dr. Reynolds' evaluation. "Your Honor, we have a recent psychiatric assessment from Dr. Reynolds, a respected geriatric psychiatrist, who found Mrs. Harper to be fully competent with no signs of cognitive impairment." Madison's lawyer objected immediately. "Your Honor, this evaluation was conducted without Mrs. Madison Harper's knowledge or input, and therefore lacks critical context about Mrs. Sylvia Harper's daily functioning. I conducted a thorough and standard evaluation." Dr. Reynolds testified. "Mrs. Harper demonstrated excellent memory, reasoning skills, and judgment. Furthermore, I observed concerning signs that she was being subjected to psychological manipulation consistent with elder abuse." Judge Baker leaned forward. "Elder abuse is a serious allegation. Dr. Reynolds, can you elaborate?" "Mrs. Harper displayed symptoms consistent with gaslighting being made to question her own memory and perceptions. When I asked about financial issues her daughter-in-law had reported, Mrs. Harper had no recollection of making the errors attributed to her." Madison was whispering furiously to her lawyer, her composure beginning to crack. Next, Richard called Georgia Wilson to the stand. My neighbor described how she had observed Madison's controlling behavior over months, culminating in the recordings she'd made. "I was watering my plants when I overheard Madison Harper on her phone in Sylvia's front yard." Georgia testified. She was saying, and I quote, "Once the guardianship is approved, we can list the house immediately. The market is hot, and we could easily get $800,000. She won't be able to stop it once you're appointed guardian." The courtroom murmured as Georgia played the recording. Madison's voice was unmistakable, discussing the sale of my home as if it were already hers. Then came the recording of Madison speaking with Jeffrey Westbrook, where she mentioned both financial gain and making her pay for what she did to you. The connection between Madison's actions and revenge for my whistleblowing years ago was now established, but our strongest evidence came from Diana Johnson. With methodical precision, she walked the court through the financial evidence we'd gathered: forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, and the systematic pattern of transactions designed to make me appear incompetent. "Your Honor, what we're seeing here is a sophisticated form of financial elder abuse," Diana explained. Madison Harper created a paper trail of irregular transactions that she then used as evidence of Sylvia's supposed incompetence. She deliberately manufactured the very problems she's now citing as reasons for guardianship. As Diana presented bank records showing withdrawals with forged signatures alongside examples of my actual signature, I watched Judge Baker's expression change from neutral to increasingly troubled. But the most damning evidence was still to come. Richard submitted the video footage from my hidden camera, showing Madison practicing my signature, photographing financial documents, and making phone calls while claiming to be me. The courtroom fell silent as we watched Madison rifling through my desk drawers, finding my emergency cash, and pocketing it without hesitation. "Mrs. Harper," Judge Baker said, addressing me directly for the first time, "do you have anything you wish to add to your counsel's presentation?" I stood carefully, my legs steady despite the stress of the morning. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe there are some serious misunderstandings about my situation that need to be addressed." Madison's confident expression flickered for just a moment. Mr. Patterson half rose from his seat, clearly preparing to object to whatever I might say, but I wasn't finished. I'd like to present one final piece of evidence that I believe is relevant to these proceedings. I reached into my purse and pulled out a printout of the online listing for my emerald wedding ring, with Madison's email address clearly visible in the contact information. This is my wedding ring, the one my husband Richard gave me 38 years ago, with our personal inscription inside. The same ring I was told I had misplaced due to my supposed confusion. It's being sold online by my daughter-in-law. Judge Baker examined the printout, then looked up at Madison, who had gone completely pale. Your Honor, Madison's lawyer interjected, we have no way of verifying that this ring belongs to Mrs. Harper or that my client is connected to this listing. Actually, Your Honor, Richard countered. We have documentation from the jeweler who cleaned and appraised the ring last year, including photographs and the inscription details, and the email address in the listing is registered to Madison Harper. Judge Baker studied the documents for a long moment, then looked up. Her expression transformed from judicial neutrality to barely controlled anger. Mrs. Harper, she said quietly to Madison, are you currently attempting to sell your mother-in-law's wedding ring online? Madison's composure finally cracked completely. She doesn't even wear it anymore. She left it in her jewelry box for months, and after everything we've done for her. She's a manipulative leech who's been stealing from us for years, Madison shouted, her carefully constructed facade crumbling entirely. I didn't flinch at her outburst. I stood, calm and dignified. As Judge Baker examined the final affidavit, I'd handed her documentation from the police, showing that Madison had been investigated for similar financial exploitation of an elderly widow 3 years earlier. Judge Baker's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. No one moves. Close the doors. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Baker turned to the bailiff. Please contact Detective Martinez from the Elder Abuse Unit. I want him here immediately. As we waited for the detective, Judge Baker addressed the court. The petition for guardianship is not only denied, it's dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. Sylvia Harper has demonstrated exceptional mental competence and remarkable courage in documenting what appears to be a sophisticated criminal conspiracy against her. She turned to look at me directly. Mrs. Harper, I want you to know that elder abuse is one of the most underreported crimes in our society. Victims are often convinced they're experiencing natural confusion rather than deliberate manipulation. Your decision to fight back may have saved not only your own independence, but protected other potential victims from this predator. Detective Martinez arrived quickly, accompanied by Assistant District Attorney Wells. Their presence transformed the atmosphere completely. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a criminal investigation. Mrs. Madison Harper, Detective Martinez said formally, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Madison's scream echoed through the courtroom as the handcuffs clicked into place. This is insane, Austin. Tell them how confused she's been, how she's been making things up. But Austin wasn't looking at his wife anymore. He was staring at me with an expression of horror and dawning understanding. My son, my gentle, trusting son, was finally seeing the woman he'd married for what she really was. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. Oh God, Mom, what did we do to you? After the hearing, Austin and I sat in Barbara's car in the courthouse parking lot. He was crying deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. I helped her, he kept saying. I helped her isolate you. I helped her make you feel crazy. How could I not see what she was doing? I reached over and took his hand, the same hand I'd held when he was a frightened little boy. She's very good at what she does. Austin, the detective told me they found evidence of 2 other elderly women she'd targeted in neighboring towns. This wasn't impulse. It was a pattern. But you're my mother. I should have protected you. You thought you were protecting me. She convinced you I needed protecting from myself. We sat in silence for a while, watching people come and go from the courthouse, normal people dealing with normal legal matters, divorces, traffic tickets, property disputes, nothing like the nightmare we'd been living through. What happens now? Austin asked finally. Now we figure out how to rebuild, I said. Both of us. The investigation moved quickly. Within a week, Detective Martinez had traced the full extent of Madison's theft. She'd stolen $63,000 from my various accounts over 6 months using forged signatures and stolen account information. The money had gone toward credit card payments, a new car, and a down payment on a vacation home she'd been planning to surprise Austin with after she'd gained control of all my assets. The vacation home purchase was what ultimately sealed her fate. She'd used my forged signature to secure a loan, creating a paper trail that was impossible to explain away. But more disturbing than the money was the psychological evidence. Investigators found detailed notes in Madison's handwriting documenting her strategy for isolating me from friends and family. She'd kept a journal of my daily activities, looking for signs of confusion she could exploit. She'd even researched the symptoms of early-stage dementia to better mimic them in her reports to Austin and others. It was systematic, calculated, and utterly without conscience. And the connection to my past was confirmed when investigators found emails between Madison and Jeffrey Westbrook, her former boss whose accounting fraud I had exposed years earlier. "I found the woman who ruined you," she had written, "and I'm going to take everything from her." The trial 8 months later was swift and decisive. Madison's new lawyer tried to argue that she genuinely believed I was incompetent and had been trying to help, but the evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings were particularly damaging, especially the conversation with Jeffrey Westbrook discussing their shared satisfaction at my downfall. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. The judge noted that elder abuse was a particularly heinous crime because it targeted society's most vulnerable members and destroyed the trust that families depend on. During the months leading up to the trial, Austin and I slowly began rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Trust once shattered so completely doesn't heal quickly, but we both committed to the work of repairing what Madison had broken. Austin started visiting regularly, not to check on my competence, but to simply spend time with his mother. We talked about Richard, about Austin's childhood, about the dreams and disappointments that make up a life. For the first time in years, we had conversations that weren't filtered through Madison's manipulation. He helped me reconnect with friends I'd lost during Madison's isolation campaign. My bridge group welcomed me back with tears and fierce hugs. Georgia Wilson became a dear friend, checking on me regularly and sharing her gardening tips. Even my mail carrier, Mr. Rodriguez, mentioned how glad he was to see me looking like myself again. Most precious of all, with the help of the police, I recovered my emerald wedding ring. The online buyer had fortunately not yet completed the transaction when Madison was arrested. Putting it back on my finger felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. 6 months after the trial, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I came out of retirement. Using my settlement money and my accounting expertise, I started a small consulting practice focused on financial protection for seniors. I partnered with Diana Johnson to offer services ranging from basic financial reviews to complex forensic accounting for suspected elder abuse cases. The work was deeply satisfying. Every senior citizen I helped protect from financial predators felt like a victory against the kind of evil that had almost destroyed my own life. I spoke at community centers about warning signs of elder abuse. I worked with local law enforcement to help them recognize financial manipulation tactics. Most importantly, I helped other victims understand that being targeted didn't mean they were weak or foolish. It meant they'd encountered a predator, and predators are skilled at what they do. Austin found his own way to heal by joining me in this mission. At first hesitantly, then with growing confidence, he began speaking at my presentations, sharing his perspective as someone who had been unwittingly complicit in elder abuse. His testimony was powerful, a warning about how manipulators use family connections to facilitate their crimes. "I wanted so badly to believe that Madison loved me," he told one audience, "that I ignored evidence that should have been obvious. When you love someone, you make excuses for them, but love should never require you to betray your principles or harm others." Today, I stand before you at 63, no longer anyone's victim. My emerald ring catches the light as I tend to my garden. My bridge club meets weekly in my dining room around my antique table, which Austin helped me recover from the donation center. My sister Barbara visits often, as do new friends I've made through my advocacy work. I've learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, that the wisdom and experience of older adults have value and power, that family is defined by respect, not just by blood, and that autonomy and independence must be protected at any age. What would you do if you were in my position? Have you seen similar warning signs in your own life or the lives of loved ones? Remember, the most dangerous predators are the ones closest to us, wearing the mask of love and concern while plotting to take everything we have. If my story has helped you, please check out other videos on this channel about protecting your loved ones. Don't forget to comment where you're watching from and subscribe to stay updated with more stories like mine. I am Sylvia Harper, 63 years old, and I am nobody's victim anymore.